Hi, welcome back to Kakona Cricket Cast. I'm your host Pratham. I'm joined by my mate Rohan. And Rohan, you were really excited to see this clash between the Rajasthan Royals and RCB
I
for a
mean,
very specific reason, right?
yeah, on one hand, this season, this looked like it was going to be a pretty important matchup, especially with playoff implications.
Yeah.
But the real reason anyone actually wants to watch an RCB Rajasthan Royals match, unless you're an RCB or Rajasthan fan, is because you're all waiting for the choke. We're all collectively waiting to see how can each team manage to lose this match from a winnable position at any point.
Yeah, like the batting collapses, the tragedy.
Bowling suddenly becoming inaccurate. The fielders dropping dollies or missing a run out that is so apparent and obvious. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I do bristle at that description because I'm a Rajasthan fan, but I see your point. I mean, we had last season we had one of the worst seasons I've seen in a long time, despite looking promising at times.
I will say, going into that season, you were both getting on me for saying that I think Rajasthan is going to be awful. I'm like, yes, Sangha's a good coach. Yes, they have some interesting young players. Yes, they have Sanju Samson. He's fantastic, and all of that stuff. I still don't buy this team. And you guys were like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. What are you saying? And then immediately Rajasthan collapses, and you guys are like, okay, we're going to pretend I never said that.
Yeah. No, I was about to say, it's good that I had a prediction that they were going to win it because that was so accurate, right? That they were going to win last season.
I was like, no, they're not. They're going to be battling for a wooden spoon, and they were battling for a wooden spoon last year.
They didn't get it. They didn't get it.
They didn't get it. They didn't get it. They did their best.
It turns out that my prediction seems to be at least one, just a little premature in hindsight.
Yes,
but no,
this year they've been awesome.
Yeah, they have, and they secured yet another win to be comfortably nested near the top of the rankings. And they did it in a really fascinating game, I thought. So let's talk about that game, and let's start out by talking about the teams that both sides picked for this match. So, coming to the squads themselves, right? Both teams actually made quite a few changes from the lineup last time. So, let's start with Rajasthan, right, Rohan? Because the subtractions and additions that they made to their playing 11, I should say, came really despite winning their last game. And the selections they made, I thought, made sense. Like Obed McCoy, he had a pretty poor game last match, and his last over was especially poor, right? To the point where like he might have been the bowler who like lost a match defending 36 off 6. So usually that's not a great sign if you're a death bowler. Now I like Obed McCoy. I do think it's a little bit harsh to drop him after a couple of matches, but the option that they want to replace him with, right? Kuldeep Sen, who they replaced with in this match, he's given signs that he can fire in Yorkers and sort of bowl that harder length at a 10 kilometers per hour quicker than McCoy, right? So for me, he becomes a really good option because he has an enhanced skill set compared to McCoy. But then also, like having him in the squad, right? It allows, or in the doing so, right? Getting him in. It allows them to sort of play a foreign player, not named Bolt, Butler, or Hetmeyer, who could shore up that lower order that's been kind of weaker, that lower middle order, I should say. So I thought it was a good move. And then I thought bringing Mitchell in place with him, with Sen in the squad, right, was also a really good decision, right? Because Mitchell's got that sort of, he's how to explain it? He's like that New Zealand Dibley Dobler.
The classic New Zealander, the eternal New Zealander.
Yeah, he throws it back to the 90s in all the right ways, But yeah, no, he's military medium pace, right? You would say.
Yeah.
And it actually is good for this team, I think, because it provides sort of a degree of variety into the attack, right? And it makes it difficult for batsmen to sort of time the ball to the fence. And we've already seen that ability, right? In the World Cup, the T20 semi-final, remember, between New Zealand and England, he's able to hit pacers down the ground for 6 pretty cleanly, strike it really cleanly. And he's also done that in Test cricket, so it's not just a one-off fluke.
I also do think that this is also a little bit of a throwback to old school T20 cricket, where like India won a World Cup basically just by bowling medium pacers and then just picking like 3 spinners and being like, okay, we got it.
Yeah, never forget Joginder Sharma, dude.
Joginder Sharma, legend of Indian cricket. I mean that completely unironically. He was a wonderful servant for the team. But let's moving on to RCB. I think that their changes in selection were fairly sensible. Apart from a 50 that Rawat caught against the struggling Mumbai side, which is not a sentence I expected to say this year, he's looked pretty uncomfortable at the top of the order. So, particularly when he tries to come down the wicket to smack pacers with those end of bat shots towards square leg or long on, and you know, it does mean that bowlers have to work on their lengths. Just to make sure that they stay in length.
They've got to adjust it, right? So that they correct their length so they don't get whacked if they bowl that same length, right?
And honestly, Rawat just doesn't look like he has a plan B if they don't start moving, which kind of makes him pretty vulnerable. And he also took a lot of dot balls alongside Faf, who himself has been a bit of a conservative opener this year. Although I think that's a little bit just due to the fact that, well, this team is not very reliable batting-wise. Which is a weird thing to say about a team that has Virat Kohli in it. But
it's not a recipe.
But it's not a recipe for long-term success. So obviously they made the decision to drop Rawat, bring in Patidar. And while he doesn't have as much power as Rawat does, he is able to keep the scoreboard ticking, which is actually something that's really important. And we've talked about not just this year in the IPL, but last year. Right? You don't need to hit 6s every single ball, but if you can get 1s and 2s and 3s grouped together, you can score a lot of runs very quickly. And partially that's just because he can score with a lot of shots around the wicket. So personally, I thought it was a pretty good decision for them to make that switch.
Yeah. So I mean, all in all, I thought both sides did make some of the right changes that they could. And so it set up a good contest, you know. Regards to the pitch, well, it certainly had a fair amount of live green grass on it, right, Rohan? Which, in theory, right, if you were to listen to the theory about pitches that are reported around the world all the time, that should have sort of helped it give it some more pace and bounce, as well as some seam movement off the deck. But as usual, you always have to like look and get indications.
You have to account for the fact that this is in the subcontinent.
Yeah, and you also just have to get in and look into the fact and take into account, right, what the actual state of the pitch, both on the surface and more towards the underneath or like behind all the exterior of the grass is, right? And when you did that for this match, when you looked at it a little bit more closely, right, the surface underneath was a bit rough and dry. And abrasive, right? Now that abrasiveness, it was especially found on that pitch, from what I could tell, around that good to hard length area, so just short of a length. And so that suggested a surface where the ball was going to grip into the wicket and come off the wicket at times at a pace lesser than what the batsman would expect. And as such, Rohan, I didn't really anticipate it to be a high-scoring match, because as the match would go on, I anticipated that with the hot weather that was there, right? It was the temperatures were predicted to rise or to be high during the match. The abrasiveness of the surface was only just going to become greater. And so I thought that would cause the pitch to become harder to bat in the second innings. So all things considered, I thought given that even though there was this grass, it was going to actually help increase the pace and bounce of the surface, but you had that abrasiveness where things were going to react a little bit unevenly. I thought that if you were to bat first, a total under the normally unassuming 150 to 160 range, right, would be a winning total.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I also, when I looked at the budget, I was like, okay, 150 is probably right around par. Probably 160 is par. And it's going to be difficult to bat on, but it's not that. It shouldn't be impossible in a sense.
Yeah, because like some of the grass did offer some extra like bounce, right? So
Right.
you'd be able to like hit. It wasn't a slow low wicket.
It wasn't the J-Hawk.
Yeah, you're not going to struggle to time every single ball, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was a reasonable total. And when Faf won the toss and then he chose to bat second by electing to field first, I didn't really think for those reasons, right? Given that this pitch was going to just get harder to bat on as the game progressed, I didn't really think it was a wise decision given the conditions. I thought the start of the match in the first power play was fascinating, right? Because I'm just going to try to summarize it because there's a lot going on. You had your sixth choice bowler open the innings in Shabazz. You had a 14-run over with two outstanding deliveries, right? One which resulted in a wicket, mixed in with three hit-me balls that were dispatched to the fence. Siraj bowled that over. He's a pretty good bowler. You had a pinch hitter who was breezily accelerating till he couldn't keep one ball down the ground and down on the ground, I should say, and got out. You had a wicket maiden. You had some strokes which were exquisite. I mean, when Sanju Samson plays strokes, they usually tend to be timed pretty well. So in a nutshell, you kind of had everything going on that one could hope from the start of a T20 match.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's talk about that pinch hitter move, right, from Rajasthan. Ron, what did you think about Ashwin being promoted at number 3 and asked to get a move on?
So I think it was a good move, in part because A, I am an unabashed Ashwin fan, and B, because he is a solid batsman. When the guys you're compared to, but you can make a comparison to as a batsman in Test match cricket are beefy, both of them. Because he's the only guy who has more fifers and hundreds in the same match than Ashwin does. So when you look at it like that, or you look at the fact that CSK did something very similar to this about 3 or 4 years ago,
with
where
Harbhajan,
they used Harbhajan Singh instead of Ashwin, in a similar sort of role where they're like, well, we've lost one wicket, let's send in someone here to stabilize the order, let us get back in the match, but it's on our terms when we have field restrictions working in our favor.
Yeah, they did it with Sam Curran as well, I remember.
Yeah, later on, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting move, right? And I'd agree with you in this case, right? I think I don't think it's a poor decision to get him up the order in the power play if he plays like this more often. Now I do have my reservations, right, Rowan? Because I don't think Ashwin's a good enough player where in T20s
he's not.
No, to bat at this sort of tempo, right, from ball one, right? Like, he's not the guy who kind of whacks.
I mean, to be fair, he was also a pretty good batsman as a young player, but he's also, to be fair, 30-something years old now.
Yeah.
With hip injuries and lower body injuries, and it's like, what's that if you're in India?
Yeah, no, he's not like a guy who's like a biffer, right? Your traditional idea of a pinch hitter is you get somebody in there who can give you like a really rapid, quick fire start and gets you off base, so you exploit the fielding restrictions within your initial power play overs, right?
Right.
I don't think Ashwin's that man usually, especially if the wicket's sort of offering more lateral movement. Like, when we were talking the pitch, right? I sort of implied this, but the green grass on the wicket this time, because it was dry and rough underneath, it didn't really translate into much seam movement. So he kind of didn't have to face that. But there are pitches that have been, even in this competition, where there has been more seam movement. And I don't think he's necessarily got the technique to quite survive in those particular conditions going at an aggressive rate. So I don't think he would be a good fit for that. I don't think he would be a good fit if the wicket was really slow as well, because again, he's not the kind of guy who has like just the sheer power to clear the fence when situations are happening like that. But on a surface like this in the first innings, where for the first couple of overs the ball was coming onto the bat fairly nicely, it's worth the experiment, right? To bump your run rate up, especially because Butler's approach this IPL has been different, right? He's not been the Josh Butler of old in that he tries to go aggressively from ball one. He's often tried to defend the first 10 balls, maybe 15 balls, and then really accelerate, right? Immediately after that. So that puts a lot of pressure on the other guys opening with them, the guys coming in at 3 to initially, if nothing is happening, to do that. He's made up for it because he's made hundreds. He's been great, right?
Yeah.
But
you cannot deny that he is in good form.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's top class in this IPL. He might be on track to break even Virat Kohli's record of 2016, and I never thought I'd say that, right? But if he's going to set himself up to play the long innings, you don't want the run rate to stall, and so on a pitch like this, somebody like Ashwin actually makes a little bit of sense. It also just makes sense because their batting order is a little bit weak theoretically, lower middle order, so that way you're getting your batsmen out early, right? And you're getting that extra bat, so if a lot of wickets are lost, you have somebody to bat at the end and so forth. So I thought it was a decent move, all things considered, right? But let's talk about stuff that happened after that sort of manic phase, right? Because things sort of settled down a bit. They became a little bit more attritional. I don't know if you can use that word in the sense of a T20. It's a word much more suited for a test match, right? But I thought that central to the Rajasthan innings sort of stalling a little bit in terms of tempo was down to Harshal Patel, right?
Yeah.
Rohan, I kind of get annoyed at this point talking about Harshal every time.
He's just good. He's just a quality player.
Yeah,
there's nothing else to say. He's just quality.
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing this for RCB time and time again, right? Like since last season. So it's kind of annoying to talk.
It's beating a dead horse, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. But there was a facet of his bowling that I want to bring up that people don't talk about enough, right? Because people talk about all those brilliant slow ball variations, right? The superbly disguised ones, but he has a lot of straight smarts as a bowler, and he's able to bowl accurately to a field set, right? And we saw that today. I'll just give an example, right? He bowls his first over immediately after the power play. That's the 7th over. The two batsmen who are batting who are pretty good, Samson and Mitchell. Faf sets a pretty heavily dominated leg side field where, because of the lack of fielders on the offside in really good places, if he erred on the offside, he'd go for 4, right? Harshal comes in, very first over, so he's not necessarily warmed up. He delivers 6 out of 6 balls into the pads. So normally, you would think he's drifting down leg, this is bad bowling, yada, yada, yada. But he bowled really well for the field set because all the fielders were there. And he only gave away 8 runs in the process, right? And he basically, till the final over where Parag took him down, he pretty much did bowl very accurately with the fields that were set, right? So I thought it's an effort that's going to get underrated today because he only took 1 wicket. He went for 8 runs and over, but he did a really good job till that last over, and he nearly tightened the screws permanently on the Rajasthan effort.
As you were saying, Riyan Parag kind of made his effort not meaningless, but rather underrated, right?
Yeah.
Because he came in, did an exceptional job coming in after 4 wickets were down for not much, and really hit out and put pressure back on RCB. Although this was a little bit too late for meaningful impact in the inning. Not to say it wasn't a meaningful innings, it's just that you normally want that innings to come in after you've got 50 runs on the board or 100 runs on the board, and you can really exploit it. But he did a fantastic job, while the rest of the team kind of folded like a deck of wet cards.
Yeah.
His cover drives in particular were just awesome.
Yeah, and I really like that you brought that cover drive point, right? Because I know what shot you're referring to. It's that shot off Hazelwood, right? It was really pleasant to watch, and
you know me.
Yeah, no, it was a great shot, man. I mean, it's hard not to be persuaded as a cricket connoisseur or fan or lover when you see somebody playing a lofted cover drive. It's just a glorious shot to see, right? And I thought it was really good for another reason, right? And in that it was very good anticipation. Because the ball that Hazelwood bowled, right? So it looked like a slower ball that he was trying to deliver slightly wider, in terms of line, but also wider from the crease. If you looked at it a little bit closely, he was closer to the stumps for most deliveries, came a little bit wider for that one. And so I thought he was trying to take it away from Parag's hitting arc, right? But Parag got himself into a really nice position that was bent on one knee, where his sort of center of mass was low. And so he could really use that, in addition to the sort of extra, like, sort of power and weight transference that he could use in the shot. He could also sort of use that bottom hand, like, wristiness to good effect to generate the power that you would need to clear the fence, right? When the ball is a little bit slower in that range. And, it's actually a really good shot. It's not your traditional cover drive, actually, but it's like a really nice lofted sort of, shot, the over cover, right? And what I wanted to sort of point out, right? It just goes to show the guy. He's got a lot of detractors. I mean, we haven't rated him in the past, so I'll put my hands up and say I'm kind of been in that camp. And there are a lot of people who've said that he's just a PR machine and he's a dancer on social media who lucked out because he had family connections to play. Like, his father is deeply involved in Indian cricket, I think, or some relative of his, from what I've heard. And look, I'm not going to be the guy who's reactionary, right? I'm not going to say that one innings where he got badly dropped halfway into, right, is sufficient to prove his worth. I certainly don't think he's international class yet. Or for that matter, even somebody who's like a 2-goal bankable star in the IPL. But he's also just 20, right? Yeah. He kind of usually comes
like we have seen many players who are like 20 years old, and either fizzle out because they didn't have what it took, or look like they didn't have what it took at 20, but 5 years on are fantastic, amazing players who are well respected in the world of cricket.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he's definitely not a guy who deserves the level of infamy in terms of reputation, right? Because he also comes into bat at like 6 or 7, right? He gets 10 or 15 balls remaining, usually. He's kind of going out, and he's just trying to have a slog to get as many runs as possible. He has some stroke-making ability and inventiveness that would suggest that he could become, in time, a solid player in this format. And all I'm going to say is it's not irrational to see why Rajasthan, if they have to pick an uncapped player or they're looking at a guy who's young, their line of thought, right, that he could be developed in due course to be a good bat for them. I can see the logic or the merit in it. He's not there yet, in my opinion, but there is, over time, you do get the sense that he could be there, right, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. But I also want to make a shout out to another young player, Hasranga, who was really, really good. He built tight lines, he used angles that made his googly and straighter deliveries look like they're going away. At first, to really threaten the batsman.
And the thing about him is also he adjusts his pace very well, right? Like,
he's a very canny bowler.
Yeah,
in that sense, right? And it's going to put him in good stead going forward. I'm a big fan of his work so far. But if we have to talk about somebody who let the team down, I think we have to talk about Shahbaz Ahmed.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Every time I watch Shahbaz Ahmed play, he performs like one of the worst bowlers I've ever seen bowl at his level.
But he's good, man.
It's not that he's a bad player, right? Like, when I watch him, like, in highlights, or if I watch a match back, it looks like a pretty good player. Shahbaz Ahmed, I mean, I don't get the talent. I don't see it personally, but I do know that he's a good player. I mean, you can look at the data, you can look at the numbers, and you can say, well,
and he's done well this IPL cycle, right? He's done well this IPL cycle.
He's done well. But when you look at him bowl today, he bowled right into the hitting zone. He really didn't spin the ball with enough revs to induce a false shot. His failure, alongside Parag's excellent batting, really got Rajasthan to 144. I don't think it was par. I don't think they considered it to be par, but it was, as it would turn out, good enough.
Under a lot of pressure to defend a target I thought was 10 runs short, Rajasthan, they would have wanted to strike early. So dismissing some of the bigger names within the RCB top order, it was a good idea for them because it would expose the talented but sort of inexperienced, uncapped Indian middle order who could be more prone to succumbing under pressure, at least in theory. And they ended up doing a pretty good job of trying to put that theory into practice because they got a start which was not far off from what they would have imagined, right? They picked up 3 wickets for themselves, like RCB did earlier on, inside the first 7 overs. And I've got to admit, I felt they were sort of aided by RCB, specifically in that RCB made the decision to promote Kohli up the order to open. Kohli's been in pretty terrible form throughout this IPL cycle, and barring one match, he's kind of been a victim to fast bowlers in the power play, right? He's either chased after a wide one while driving, he's been overwhelmed by the extra bounce from a shorter length with some others, and that's just what happened here today, right? He struck 2 boundaries off fairly wide-ish deliveries, but both were pretty unconvincing. Like there was an edge that went down near the third man region in one of them, and he got to start, but it was like 8 off 8, 8 off 6, right? And again, very edgy, very unconvincing, very nervy. And then full credit to Prasidh Krishna, right? The Rajasthan bowler at hand, because he set him up beautifully, right, Rohan? And it was like sort of playing like it was like playing a game of poker with a batsman, right? Because the length was varied very nicely. It went full, short, and so the next ball in that sequence would have been the fuller one,
right?
But he got the short one, the well-directed short one that was better directed than the last one that went for like kind of a wide. It was straight, sort of aimed at his throat, and he really could only spoon it up in the air with the mistime pull. And then Sen came in, and he just ripped through the heart of the RCB batting lineup. You know, like the 2 guys that after Kohli got out and Patidar was still like had come in, the 2 guys that they would have really relied on, especially because Patidar's inexperience, would have been the skipper, Faf, who got a really good score last match, and the lead all-rounder, right, in Maxwell.
Yeah.
Both were gone within the span of 3 balls.
Yeah, but I was really impressed by their entire bowling lineup, because on this pitch, we expected to see the fast bowlers do their thing because it was green, and as you mentioned earlier, there was some roughness underneath, so there would be some inconsistency in bounce, and that would be pretty good for fast bowlers.
From that hard length, especially.
Yeah, especially in that hard length. But the spinners for Rajasthan were magnificent, genuinely very good. Yes, the pressure was set by Sen and Prasidh's opening bursts, but Ashwin joined in with a really good spell in the middle of the innings, where he found the optimal balance between using his stock and Karen ball to get 3 wickets, including his 150th IPL wicket.
Yeah, and he struggled with that before, right? I just want to, point that out.
No, because Ashwin's reputation is he's the man with 1 million deliveries.
Yeah, so and he just uses them. He spams them constantly, but he didn't do that here. He did that pretty sensibly. Right,
and one other thing that I was really impressed with, just the constant, unyielding pressure. It's very easy in a match like that, where mathematically the match is over by the 18th over, to just take your foot off the gas and say, look, these guys aren't going to score 50 runs or something like that. Not 50 runs, like 30 runs in the next 2 overs. Like they're just not going to do it. Like, they don't have the batsmen to do it. It's the 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, not the 9 and 10, the 10 and 11.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going to do it. But they didn't. And that's a really, really key aspect when you're trying to say, okay, is this team actually going somewhere, or are they flat into the seat? Because teams like Rajasthan in previous seasons, like Mumbai and CSK, whenever they got in that position, they just did not let go. They knew they were on top, and they would have beat you down until you were all out, or the match was over, right? Whichever came first. So I was pleasantly surprised to see Rajasthan able to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
As for RCB's batting, I agree with you. I think you can only describe it as poor.
Yeah,
they never seem to get settled. Their batsmen either got out playing rashly the good balls, or in the case of DK, got themselves run out. By
Yeah,
the
that
way,
run out
that
was
is
silly.
yeah, it was one of the silliest runouts that you can imagine. Like that should not have been a run out. Like
It's
at
just
least
blind panic.
dive, man. At least dive and try and make the ground.
Yeah,
But
it's just
like,
blind panic at that point, right? Because they lost so many wickets that like just trying to get singles out of nowhere.
and they just couldn't do it, and it wasn't even a good throw. The bowler dropped the ball, but when you look at it's not very good. Faf did all right. I mean, he's Faf Duplessis. He's been pretty good in the last few years in the IPL. But the rest of the side just was not good enough. And the sad sight of Harshal trying to hit one at the end, but holding out.
Yeah.
It's just kind of heartbreaking in a sense.
Yeah, because he's a good bat, like he's a good slogger usually at the at the end, right? Like he can.
But
he can hit
when your team can't last 20 overs to make that worth it, it's kind of sad for RCB because they played pretty well to start the match off. They got them. The bowlers did their job. They got them out for under 150, which was par on this course.
Yeah, they just couldn't finish it off, and it puts a really, as you said, sort of a sad complexion to the game, right? Because this happened last time to them as well. They got bowled out for 68. You don't want to be bowled out twice inside 20 overs. All right, with all of that said, time for our general takeaways from this match. And let's start off with RCB first. So in terms of the Royal Challengers Bangalore, even though they stumbled to yet another heavy defeat in a row, Rohan, their bowling actually, as we were alluding to, right? It's looked stronger than it did at the start of the season. And I would put that mainly down to one figure, right? Josh Hazelwood. Yes, he did get thrashed in the last game by SRH, specifically by a guy who's a relative rookie in Abhishek Sharma, a talented guy, but you don't want your lead strike bowler to get smashed by a guy who's just having his breakout season in the IPL, right? But when your team gets out for 68 in the first innings and you're trying to salvage something against a opposition batsman with the license to smash you to try to improve his side's net run rate in a match he's going to win, or his side's definitely going to win, even the sort of best bowlers are going to get whacked, right? And that's what Hazelwood's situation was with Abhishek Sharma. So it's understandable why he didn't perform in the last match, right? But before that game, right, Hazelwood had 6 wickets in the 2 games he played, a 4-4 and then a 2-4. Those are not bad stats by any means. And he proved why he was so successful in those games again today, right? It was in evidence today. Because on a wicket where bowling sort of that 7 to 8 meter length from the batting crease, I'm talking about mainly like a length that's just like in the halfway range mark, that's on the shorter side of the good length range from the batting crease. It was ideal to sort of exploit the inconsistency and pace and an extra bounce that this wicket was offering, right? And so Hazelwood, he hit that spot in those ranges super consistently. I mean, it makes sense. He does that in test matches as well. But he only gave up a boundary, I remember, off an inside edge from a ball that was a bit too full and close to cut, right? And that was the only boundary that gave up the entire day. And I thought his figures at the end, right? 19 runs, 1 maiden, 2 wickets off 4 overs. They truly reflected his performance, and they're about as good, right, Rohan, that you can expect from your frontline pacer in this format. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, all in all, I think the duo of him and Harshal sort of provide as good of a pairing as you can find in this format, right? Especially in an IPL side. And with Siraj sort of firing today, if they could just find a more consistently performing spin bowling option apart from Hasaranga, right? I think they would have the perfect balanced attack.
Yeah. I do think that, however, as you mentioned, their bowling has been pretty good this year, but their batting hasn't. On a wicket where 144 was genuinely below par, right? I thought it was probably closer to 160, thought it was closer to 150, that would be par. They fell 30 runs short of their opponents for the loss of all of their wickets. Some of that is just due to how well Rajasthan bowled, some of that is due to the pitch, but a lot of that is down to their lack of application. They needed their big bats to perform. Faf, Kohli, and Maxwell, really in particular, need to deliver for them, and they just aren't backing up the excellent work that their bowlers have been doing all year.
Yeah, and I think the point with especially Kohli is so apt, right? Because he's the guy now. He's even
they built this entire squad around Virat Kohli. Let's be completely honest. It's yes, Faf is captain and Kohli isn't captain anymore, right? But this entire squad is entirely built around the idea that Virat Kohli is going to score runs.
Yeah, and he has,
and he hasn't scored runs this year, and that's a problem for them, and they need to figure out what that problem is. It's a problem for Virat Kohli in India too, but
yeah, and if it means that they have to, if they have to do something where they rejig the batting order and maybe even get Kohli batting lower down the order, it's something that they should consider, I think. But yeah, if we're looking at Rajasthan's game that they had and sort of looking at what they could take away from this, I think the two major things, right? After a couple of games where I've seen Sanju, his glovesmanship been a bit subpar, it was really nice to see an improvement in his keeping, because on a wicket where there was some extra bounce and the ball was sort of coming in at different paces, he took a fair amount of unevenly rising deliveries that were delivered at a pretty reasonable pace. Like Kuldeep Sen and Prasidh Krishna, his two main fast bowlers in the side that he was having to keep to, they both bowl above 140 kilometers per hour consistently, and he did that in this match. And he was able to take those deliveries without fault. Now, I'd say that there are still some indications to suggest he's not really what you would necessarily call a purely top-tier keeper. Like when that Ashwin stumping chance of Hasaranga came, right? He didn't quite collect the ball into his palms, smack dab, as you'd expect a keeper to sort of just like pouch it. But if you look at that stumping itself, right? The fact that he was able to sort of intercept that quickly sliding sort of carom ball, despite his view being obscured of that delivery, because Hasaranga's pads were already heavily towards the leg stump, beyond outside the leg stump too. Right. So he wasn't able to see the ball very clearly. And for him to get there so quickly, it shows really great reflexes, right? But it's also a matter of him throughout this match, compared to, say, even the last match, right? Him just transferring his weight well in advance to match the line of the ball, which is really integral to good keeping. And it's important because at the end of the day, because he's been doing a really fine job for Rajasthan this season as sort of that aggressive number 3, number 4 bat who can either build on that great start that Butler and co have been giving him, or in this match, for instance, rescue them a little bit when they lose earlier wickets, right? But if he can continue to do that job and a better job with the gloves and hold on to some chances, it's got the sort of potential of making a difference when you have matches that happen in the tournament that are playoffs or more crunch games, right? Really tight games where a catch could make a difference between a winner or a loss, or a good keeping could make a difference between 5 runs saved or not, and that could be the margin of a match being won or lost, right? So it's really important for him to be a good keeper as well as a good bat when he's doing both roles, and he's indicated that he could do that in this match. So really a big positive for Rajasthan going forward.
Yeah, and they also really impressed me, as I said earlier, with the ball. And if they keep this up, even if not at the same level, because after all, they had 4 bowlers with an economy under 6, 1 with an economy under 5, and none with an economy over 7, which is likely unsustainable.
Yeah, you're just going to get pitches that better bat, right? You're going to get pitches that are just better to bat on. So
right.
It's going to be hard.
And the teams that are more in form and that kind of stuff, right? But if they can keep this level of performance up, even if it isn't matched up by the numbers, if they can keep this level of performance up, or there or thereabouts, they can beat anybody on their day, provided they have something to defend.
Yeah, and they've been doing that this whole season.
Again, it reminds me of like classic CSK sides where it doesn't matter what you do. You could score 130 runs, but it was fine. They want to outmaneuver you and get you all out for 125 or something like that.
Yeah, or like Sunrisers at their peak, right? Where it didn't matter because their bowling, you would always rely on being able to,
because they know that if they can restrict you to under 130 runs pretty much on demand. So all they have to score is 135 or 140 runs, and they win.
Which for
Rajasthan, that's huge. especially going forward, because they do have batsmen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the batsmen have been informed, right? But, Butler's having a god mode season. Samson's been super aggressive coming in. Hetmeyer has literally the best stats of any any batsman at the death this season, period, right?
Yeah.
So it's really just a matter of, fixing the bowling to some extent, and also...
Well, it's more of a sense of just supporting that bowling and being consistent throughout
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. So really only positives to come from this for Rajasthan. So that's it from us, guys. Stay tuned, because we'll be, come the weekend, recording another match review for you guys. We also have other stuff in the pipelines and works. If you haven't gotten a chance, definitely check into our retrospective we did about Jonathan Trott, a very underrated batsman.
Yes.
As Rowan might attest, in that I think you saw him in that 2012 season, right? Where in India, where he was like, kind of, everybody talked about Cook and KP, but he was like a crucial batsman for them as well, right? Yeah. But yes, definitely stay tuned. So we have a lot more stuff coming in, and yeah, till then, bye-bye.
Bye.